In the future, the entire Earth was plunged into darkness after all electricity vanished. The global government even declared that electricity could no longer be generated. No one had ever imagined the terrifying conditions that would follow. This thrilling story begins with two sisters, Eva and Nell. Eva was an exceptional dancer who dreamed of representing her country at the national level. She had trained hard for years and continued practicing every day. Nell, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. She didn't care about her career at all. Her passion was hanging out with friends and simply enjoying life. Neither of them had any idea that they were about to face something far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. The two sisters lived with their father, Ben, in a farmhouse deep in the forest, far away from the city. Ben had invested a lot of money to build the farmhouse so his family could live peacefully with more space and comfort than anyone could afford in the city. One day, while Eva was practicing her dance routine and Nell was browsing online content, a sudden blackout left everything in darkness. Ben, worried, rushed to check the circuit board, while Nell went to grab an extra flashlight she remembered leaving in the car. She got the flashlight, but accidentally left the car running all night, draining the battery completely. By morning, the car wouldn't start, leaving them stranded in the forest. Ben, deeply concerned about the back-to-back power failures, searched his garage for solutions. He found another battery and an old radio. When he switched it on, the broadcast revealed chilling news. The government admitted the global power supply had collapsed, electricity centers were damaged beyond repair, and recovery seemed impossible. Citizens were ordered to stay inside, stock up on resources, and avoid going out at night. It felt like a new kind of pandemic, where survival meant isolation. This frightened Eva and Nell even more, as they weren't in the safety of a crowded city but isolated in the forest with limited resources. Ben knew the only option was to get the car working and head to the city. Days later, using his ingenuity, Ben managed to power the car by rigging its motor with a chainsaw machine. His daughters were overjoyed, and without wasting time, the three of them set off for the city. Along the way, they passed countless abandoned houses, eerily silent, with no neighbors in sight. It seemed most people had already fled. When they finally reached the city, they rushed into a grocery store only to discover that all the supplies had already been taken, as everyone had prepared for a long crisis. Suddenly, a man named Stan appeared before them holding a gun. Ben froze, uncertain whether this stranger was about to attack them. But Stan explained that he was keeping the gun for security because many people had been breaking into shops and looting supplies. Ben told him they would pay for everything, and then Ben and his daughters walked through the store, gathering what little remained, canned foods and packaged goods. After paying, Stan, feeling relieved, even offered Ben's family some free food. Now Ben had enough resources to last several days, so the three of them returned to their old city home. Despite the crisis, Eva still insisted on going to her dance class, as if nothing had changed, while Nell went to see her friends and boyfriend, enjoying the time with him after days of hardly speaking. With the electrical collapse, all electronic appliances were dead, yet the two seemed happy together. One night Ben took his daughter for a drive because they enjoyed night driving, but soon they spotted a man on the roadside crying out for help. Ben stopped to assist, only to find two armed men standing in front of the man, which was terrifying. They looked dangerous and might even shoot. Thinking quickly, Ben got back in the car and drove away with his daughter, confused about why those two were holding the man. Clearly their intentions were bad. For now, Ben's priority was protecting his daughters and surviving this dangerous situation. They returned to the farmhouse with all their supplies, and weeks passed with no sign of electricity being restored. Even government soldiers refused to provide protection because their own families were struggling. In effect, the government had collapsed, rules were ignored, and chaos reigned. None of this would have happened so fast if electricity hadn't completely failed. Ben never imagined such a catastrophe. He discussed with his daughters that while they were surviving on stored resources for now, they needed a plan for when those ran out. Ben reminded them he kept chickens and other animals on the farm that they could slaughter for food if necessary. With good technique they could survive for many days. Eva worried she might never represent the nation in dance, and Nell was furious at being separated from her boyfriend. She just wanted to sleep in his arms. Ben felt blessed to have such daughters, but for now survival took precedence. They resolved to follow expert survival techniques and help each other through the process. Days passed while Ben used a chainsaw and machine to cut wood for fires and to keep wild animals away. He worked constantly while his daughters relaxed at home. Suddenly a screw came loose, the balance shifted, and the chainsaw and machine became unbalanced and struck his leg. Wayne screamed in pain as the chainsaw gashed deep into his leg. Hearing his cries, both daughters rushed into the forest and found their father bleeding heavily, the wound so severe that saving him seemed impossible. With no proper medical equipment and no idea how to stop the bleeding, They could only watch helplessly as Ben writhed in agony. The city hospital was far too distant, and by the time they could reach it, he would already be gone. In his final moments, Ben urged his daughters to stay together and survive no matter what. Eva and Nell wept uncontrollably, clinging to him until he drew his last breath. Even as he died, he prayed for their safety. Losing their father shattered them completely. They had already lost their mother years ago, and now, when they needed him most, he too was gone. After crying until they could hardly breathe, the sisters dug a grave, buried him with care, and returned to the farmhouse in silence. Though they tried to compose themselves, their hearts were heavy with despair, and Nell's obsession with her boyfriend in the midst of such tragedy only made matters worse. Survival without electricity became even more daunting. They knew fire was essential for light at night, but oil supplies would not last forever. The best solution was beeswax, made from animal fat, which burned far longer than regular oil. A single beeswax candle could last for weeks, providing steady light while conserving resources. Such candles were even available online once, but now they had to make do with what they could find. Despite these techniques, their reality remained grim. Days passed with them rationing their dwindling supplies, their father's memory haunting them constantly. Eventually, Eva brought home 2 gallons of fuel and insisted on using it to power the generator for a short while, just so she could watch old videos of their parents on the TV and find some peace. Nell refused, arguing that the fuel was far too precious to waste. It might cost them another dangerous trip into the city to get more. Their disagreement escalated into a heated argument, directly against their father's dying wish that they stick together. The tension grew until they stopped speaking altogether. Then one day, when Nell went out to the farm, she was shocked to discover that all the chickens Ben had raised were dead, likely killed and eaten by a wild animal or a fox that had slipped in during the night. Their source of meat had been completely cut off, so they had to try other ways to fill their stomachs. Nell started making beans and several barbecue sauces, serving small portions for herself and Ben. When Eva arrived, she was still angry and refused to eat, barely speaking to Nell. Although Nell was younger and had always lived a carefree life, in this crisis her responsibility showed. She followed the survival steps their father had taught them. The sisters realized they had to coordinate and move forward together. One night Nell woke from sleep and could not find Eva anywhere. Terrified, she searched the house and then sprinted into the forest, calling her sister's name, convinced Eva was gone and she would be left alone. She screamed until she woke from a nightmare. Eva rushed to her side, calmed her down, and seeing Nell so shaken, forgave the earlier anger. They decided to put their quarrel behind them and stick together. They rationed the remaining supplies and got through the days. Nell found a small egg on the sofa and, starving, ate it immediately. When Eva discovered it, she was furious because Nell should have shared it, sparking another argument that escalated, until a knock at the door interrupted them. Nervous, Nell grabbed their father's gun and they cautiously opened the door to find a young man standing there, Ethan, Nell's boyfriend, who had come all this way for her. He quickly said he'd been passing by and needed shelter from a heavy storm. Nell said yes and let him in. Eva understood who he was but worried. Resources meant for 2 would now have to be split among 3, and that could make supplies run out faster. Nell spent the night talking with Ethan, and in the morning he led her to a hollow tree in the forest that had plenty of space inside. Reunited at last, they were happy and intimate again, and Ethan stayed with them for several days. But Eva finally told Nell bluntly that they couldn't keep Ethan long. Their resources would be exhausted, and she feared Nell might become pregnant, which would create more problems. Nell insisted she would handle whatever came and that they'd find another way to survive. Inside the hollow of that tree, Nell and Ethan sat together when Ethan finally confessed that he had come there only for her. Now that they were reunited, he suggested they should head to Boston. Though Boston was far away, he explained that there were societies there with electricity and plenty of resources, places where they could actually survive. Nell didn't need to think twice. All she wanted was to stay with her boyfriend, so she agreed immediately. When Eva heard this plan, she was skeptical. She insisted these were just rumors, with no solid proof such societies even existed, and said traveling thousands of miles without certainty would be far too dangerous. The journey alone could take months, and they might not even survive that long. Eva refused to take part in such a risky plan, but it was obvious from Nell's face that she was determined to go with Ethan no matter what her sister thought. Still, Nell tried to convince Eva one last time, telling her they were family and should stay together, but Eva had made up her mind. She believed staying put gave them a better chance to live a few more days. In the end, Ethan and Nell packed their things and prepared to leave. Before they set off, Eva told her younger sister to take care of herself and reach the society safely. Nell felt crushed knowing her only family was letting her go, but she still followed Ethan. Back in the big house, Eva was completely alone. To distract herself, she practiced the dance performance she had once prepared for nationals, but the loneliness overwhelmed her. She grew frustrated and angry, feeling abandoned by her own sister for a boy. Meanwhile, Ethan and Nell had walked for hours and were exhausted, deciding to rest for the night. At first, Nell was happy being with Ethan, but as time passed, guilt began to eat at her. She remembered her father's last words, telling her and Eva to stay together, and realized she had done the exact opposite. Regret kept her awake all night. By morning, Nell told Ethan she wanted to return to her sister. Ethan, knowing how inseparable the two sisters really were, decided he would go to Boston alone. He promised Nell that if he found the society, he would come back to take both sisters with him. With his blessing, Nell rushed back to the farmhouse. When Eva saw her after so long, the sisters embraced tightly, both realizing they could never live without each other. Their smiles showed pure joy, as if they had never fought at all. It proved the old truth: you only understand the value of something when it's gone. From then on, the sisters vowed to stay together. They focused on survival, using every bit of knowledge they had. Months passed, and 6 months later they discovered a book filled with information about the forest and its plants. They used it to gather resources, blueberries, vegetables, and other natural products, keeping their food supply steady. They even adapted to new habits, like using leaves instead of tissue paper. Together, they built a sustainable life, stronger than before. In a way, both sisters had managed to adapt to their harsh reality. The shocking part was that even after so many months, electricity had never returned, meaning the entire planet was still in total blackout, and people only came out during the day. The sisters supported each other as best they could. One day, Nell grabbed a bottle of liquor, and the two decided to drink together. Even though resources were scarce, they let themselves cheat a little, pouring out the bottle and sipping slowly. Feeling bold, they decided to use some fuel to power up the generator. As it rumbled to life, their appliances flickered on, and for the first time in years, they saw the glow of electricity again. Overjoyed, they made popcorn, cooked a few snacks, and even watched old family videos, seeing their father's face once more. The memories made them both emotional, but the generator didn't last long. Soon the battery died, and darkness returned. To keep spirits up, Eva danced while Nell watched, turning it into a form of entertainment and survival. Still, neither of them knew how long they could keep this going. The next day, they split tasks. Nell headed into the forest for berries while Eva chopped wood. But then, everything went wrong. A man suddenly appeared behind Eva. When she turned, she recognized him: Stan, the store manager. He claimed he was just passing through and spotted her, but Eva immediately grew suspicious of his behavior. She lied, saying her father and sister were nearby, hoping he'd leave. Instead, Stan lunged at her, knocking her axe away. He assaulted her brutally, leaving her battered and unconscious before raiding their house. He stole fuel and supplies, loaded them into his car, and left Eva broken behind. When Nell returned with fruit, she was horrified to see her sister's condition. She rushed Eva inside and treated her injuries. Thankfully, Eva wasn't gravely hurt, but the trauma left them shaken. They realized they couldn't trust anyone but each other. Nell gave Eva medication to prevent pregnancy and secured the house, locking doors and windows. Eva was left terrified, refusing to step outside, while Nell tried everything to distract and comfort her, but nothing seemed to ease her fear. A whole month passed like this, the blackout still unbroken, their supplies dwindling fast. One day, while gathering resources, Nell discovered a letter her father had left behind. Excited, she called Eva, and when they opened it, they found pumpkin seeds inside. Determined, Nell decided to plant them. But as she dug into the soil, she struck a heavy stone. Straining to pull it out, she injured her back badly, breaking a bone. She screamed in agony, and Eva rushed to her side, dragging her inside and breaking down in tears. The sisters clung to each other, realizing that no matter what happened, they had to stay together. But soon after, Eva began vomiting. To her horror, she realized the pills hadn't worked. She was pregnant. Nell immediately told her they would need to consider an abortion. However, Eva was clear: she wanted to keep the baby. This decision wasn't mutual, and it created tension, but the sisters pressed forward despite it. Months passed, and Eva's pregnancy became visibly advanced. After some research, Nell realized that for the baby to be born healthy, Eva needed proper nutrition, primarily protein from dairy or meat. These resources weren't available in their current situation, which meant Nell would have to hunt. Determined to do whatever it took for her sister and the unborn child, she grabbed her gun and ventured into the forest for the first time in her life. Suddenly, she spotted a wild pig above her. She aimed and fired, but the recoil was so strong that she fell to the ground. Nell had never hunted before, never taken a life, but she had no choice. This was for her sister. After successfully killing the pig, Nell returned home and prepared a meal, combining the freshly hunted pork with foraged berries. This provided Eva with the much-needed protein to stay strong during her pregnancy. However, nature quickly turned against them. The light rain escalated into a violent storm, tearing apart the roof of their already fragile house. Suddenly, Nell heard strange creaking noises and instinctively grabbed her gun. Investigating the source, she discovered that a portion of the roof had collapsed. Clearly, their home was no longer safe. To make matters worse, Eva began experiencing severe abdominal pain. Based on her prior research and careful study, Nell realized that Eva was about to give birth, and staying inside the unstable house could be life-threatening. Acting swiftly, the sisters navigated through the forest, following Eva's directions to reach a safer location near a sturdy tree. Nell obeyed every instruction, supporting her sister through the stressful ordeal. After intense and exhausting labor, Eva successfully gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Both sisters were overwhelmed with joy, holding the newborn together and sharing a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. Eva felt immense gratitude for Nell's courage, resilience, and unwavering support. Once the storm had passed, they returned to their home, only to find it in ruins and entirely uninhabitable. Eva devised a bold plan. They would burn the house completely using the remaining fuel. This way, if Stan or his men arrived, they would assume the sisters had perished in the fire. Nell was initially reluctant, but she soon understood it was their best option. They collected all their essential belongings and valuables, and together they made their way into the forest. Standing side by side, they set their beloved home ablaze, watching it crumble and vanish in flames. Despite the destruction, the sisters had each other, and they had mastered the skills necessary to survive independently in the forest. With their survival techniques honed over months of adaptation, they were ready to face life on their own terms. The sisters settled into their new life, supporting each other and using their knowledge to thrive. And so, the story concludes here, with the two sisters strong, resilient, and united in the forest, prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. This is how our story ends.